Fortifying the supply with fresh ones. Fortifying the supply with fresh Good morning, and thank you, Beth, for the lovely introductory music. So good morning. My name is Marjorie Wormser. I'll be serving as your Sunday associate this morning, and welcome here in this room and online to the Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, where we covenant to weave together the fabric of community from the strands of our separate lives. We are a radically inclusive, dynamically welcoming congregation, justice-seeking, and wherever you are, whoever you are, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. We adhere to the principles of Unitarian Universalism, which you can find, among other places, in the welcome card in the back of the seat directly in front of you. Please feel free to take one home if you like. And they're also available at the welcome table in the Great Hall, which you passed on your way through the front doors and into this room. This would be a great time to silence any noise-making devices. I always have to remind myself of that. And in the spirit of hospitality, I invite you to greet someone you didn't come with this morning. Could be an elbow bump, could be at distance, could be a handshake, could be a hello. Take a moment.
Good morning. I need that right now.
Okay. Please take your seats again. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for greeting one another so warmly. This is among my favorite parts of a Sunday morning. I have a few brief announcements to share, and a complete listing of all events and other notable news can be found on our website at muuf.org/calendar. So today's Odyssey Project will feature Beth Wilson at 12:45 this afternoon, right here in the meeting room. And on Thursday, April 6th of this week, at 6 p.m., Reverend Joel will be hosting a Passover Seder dinner, and registration on Realm ends today, April 2nd. So if you'd like to participate in a Passover Seder hosted by Reverend Joel, please sign up by the end of today. Also, on April 16th at 12:45 p.m. in room 204, which is upstairs, and that's the large room over the terrace room, there will be a listening session about the use of a kitchen pass-through window in the new Chu Family Hall. That's the building that we plan to be building soon. And this is intended to hear your views so the best design decisions can be made. And thank you.
Thank you, Marjorie. I'm grateful for our worship associates, and Marjorie is the chair of the committee of worship arts. So appreciate all the care and ministry she does on behalf of the fellowship. I'm Joel Miller. I'm the interim minister here at the fellowship. So glad to welcome everybody who's here in person, folks who may be with family in the library or might be hanging out in the salon, the study room, the nice wood-paneled room across from the library. You might be online. Glad you're here. So in some traditions, this is Palm Sunday. And I didn't really know much about Palm Sunday. It never really quite made sense to me as a kid growing up. Why would you have a Palm Sunday? And palms don't grow in Ohio. What is that? What was happening on Palm Sunday? And as I began to learn about the story around Palm Sunday, for me, coming to understand it came in a moment when I was reading the writing of a physician who's also grew up in the Jewish tradition but has a lovely broad embrace of spirituality. Rachel Naomi Raymond is her name. And in this particular thing that she was writing about, she talks about a night where she's had one of those dreams. I've had dreams, not often like this, but that kind of dream where you wake up all of a sudden and go, in bed. And it's usually for something very short, very brief. And it was for her. And in the dream, she was a daffodil bulb, ready to bloom, but couldn't bloom. There was a rock on top of the earth she was in. It was a long time. She really couldn't make sense of that dream. It's always on her mind in some way or another. And then she was talking with a friend she'd made, somebody who did dream work. And the friend said, which is always I've found useful in dream work, to say, well, have a conversation with the various aspects of each of these things that appear in your dream, the bulb, the rock, the earth around it. And in a flash, Rachel Naomi Raymond knew exactly what was going on. The rock was saying to the daffodil bulb, don't bloom, don't go above me, I'm going to lay here and protect you. And Rachel Naomi Raymond said, oh my gosh, that's it. And that sounds just like my father. And she realized her father, who had lived through very, very difficult life circumstances, his life had not been easy. For him, his way of showing great love was to protect his family as much as he could, to protect them from all dangers. And she realized that the daffodil had to bloom. It had to bloom in spite of the dangers. And for me, that was a moment that helped me understand what the meaning of Palm Sunday. And indeed, that is the theme of this morning. I'm so glad to welcome you all here. I invite you now to share with me as we say the affirmation for this morning and light our chalice. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its law. To the great covenant, together in peace, seek the truth and love, to help one another. I invite you to sing with me. The words will be on the screens or on the screen here, and if you'd like to use the book and you're here, I invite you to find it number 1012. Please stand and body your spirit. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, just the day before he died, he gave a speech in Memphis, Tennessee, and he talked about having gone to Israel and taken the road from Jerusalem to Jericho. And he was struck by how dangerous the road could be. And that was important to him because he was thinking back on the story of the Good Samaritan, which is a story I told at the time for all ages for the children at the first service. Might have been the first time they were hearing that story. It might be your first time too. I'd heard it before, not quite understood it until I read those words by Dr. King when he was speaking in Memphis. And I thought, wait a minute, wow, that's a story. Jesus is doing his ministry and he's teaching the people who are following him. And they ask him about the important commandments. Love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. And some wise guy says, yeah, well, who's my neighbor? And actually, I picked on Irene, and she was very generous this morning. And he said, yeah, what if Jesus is telling me I should take care of my neighbors? Well, what if I don't like my neighbor, Irene? And Irene actually said something funny like, I'm going to sit in another chair next time. Who is our neighbor? Jesus says, I have a story for you. On this road from Jerusalem to Jericho, there lies an injured person on the side of the road. And the first person to go by is one of the authorities of the city. The authority pretends not to see and just walks on by. Then a Levite, a priestly person comes by. A religious leader, maybe like a Unitarian Universalist minister, walks by and pretends not to see. Maybe they're afraid because, well, it's a very dangerous road, and maybe it's a setup. Maybe it's a decoy that robbers have set up to take advantage of your kindness. Then a third person comes, and this person doesn't stop. It's a Samaritan. Now, in those times, Jewish folks and Samaritan folks did not get along. They had a lot of bad history with one another, although interestingly enough, they were once the same people way, way, way back. Samaritans are still in Israel, as a matter of fact. Jesus is telling this story and mentions the Samaritan. So for us, can you imagine a guy with a trucker hat? It's red and it says MAGA on the front. And this is the guy who stops to help the person injured on the side of the road. Binds their wounds and actually arranges for them to be taken to the nearest inn, pays for their care so they can convalesce and get healthy again. And then Jesus says to everybody who's listening, who is your neighbor? Apparently in the story, the wise guy actually found a little wisdom and said, yeah, it's the Samaritan, isn't it? Jesus said, yeah, go live like that. We have a time for milestones, for passages, a time that in ritual reminds us that in becoming vulnerable and connected to one another, our lives are enriched. We give each other care. Our lives are less burdened. And in giving the care, we learn more about ourselves and change the larger world, or at least our understanding of how to live in it. A passage shared by Marjorie Wormser. Please hold my sister-in-law Pam in your healing thoughts. Thoughts for speedy recovery from surgery this Wednesday. She will undergo part 1 of a 2-part procedure for brain surgery to help curtail her advancing Parkinson's. Caroline Blanchard shared a passage, indeed a milestone. Congratulations to the planners of yesterday's talent show. I can tell you how cool it is to be part of a congregation in the same way that a congregation I grew up in, Unitarian Universalist, once sustained and encouraged me in my life. You have children, fourth graders, third graders, fourth graders, fifth graders, who are self-assured enough and know they are loved enough that they came and informed us they were having a talent show yesterday. They did this some weeks ago, and the talent show was great time. There were many acts. There was much laughter and singing and poetry and music and magic tricks, and that your spiritual children know that they can be creative and that they are in a place where they are loved because they take initiative. It speaks well of this community. Thank you. And I share a personal passage, yet another school shooting this week. I personally find it difficult, having been the minister of the Columbine Unitarian Universalist Church in Littleton, Colorado, in 1999, just blocks away when the shooting started. And every time one of those shootings happens, I am back there. It's good to have you to share with in a moment like this. It's good that we're together. To remember that there are different ways we can live, not by the sword, but by the heart and by love. I invite you into a spirit of meditation or prayer or contemplation. Spirit of life and love, I want to live by love. I want to live by compassion. I want to love my neighbors. I don't want to live by my fears. I don't want my children to live by fear. I don't want to live by my anger, that they must live in fear. And I know I don't because I don't want to hang on to life for fear of what will happen tomorrow, because I'm afraid of the unknown, or afraid even of what I know is possible. I've seen it. The way I hoard my life as though it were gold and had to be kept in a safe or in a vault, build walls around my heart. Spirit of life, can you imagine walls with barbed wire around the fellowship? Turn us to joy. Let the music of our souls sing this world into beauty. Let the longings of our hearts always lead us to practice kindness. Let us find with all our neighbors not the grays of the one true colors, but a rainbow of colors that make a cloudy sky bright and alive. Give us the courage not to plan for death, but to live life among friends. And when love arrives in Morristown today, coming into the city, sitting in a humble Greyhound bus, may they hear the singing of our hearts. May they see the smiles on our neighborly faces and know that the Spirit of love is here to welcome them and that when prophets speak, we know to listen to the voices of everyone beside us. Amen. So be it. Blessed be. We're going to sing together. Number 1058. It's a short piece. It feels especially poignant today. I was glad that Beth recommended it. The author of the words is Theodore Parker, who was a Unitarian minister in the middle of the 1800s, middle of the 19th century, and somebody who lived fearlessly. His words were so commanding in his time that the largest congregation in North America was in Boston with well over 2,000 members, a Unitarian church that big. So we sing his words now, number 1058. Please stand in spirit or in body. Be ours a religion.
This morning's reading is from Mary Oliver's poem, When Death Comes. I look upon everything as a brotherhood and a sisterhood, and I look upon time as no more than an idea, and I consider eternity as another possibility, and I think of each life as a flower, as common as a field daisy, and as singular. When it's over, I want to say, all my life, I was a bride married to amazement. I was a bridegroom taking the world into my arms. When it is over, I don't want to wonder if I have made of my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of argument. I don't want to end up simply having visited this world. And now is the time in our service where we give and receive our weekly offering. We believe that generosity changes lives. It changes the lives of the people in our community, and it changes our lives in the giving. We share each offering 50% with the work of this fellowship and the good work out in the greater community. And we invite your generosity. Every bit makes a difference. Thank you.
So what we're singing today is something called Why We Sing, and Show Us How to Love, which is listed in the order of service. We'll sing that on April 16th. Thank you.
Palm Sunday. There, now you can hear me. Palm Sunday happens once a week, the week right that precedes Easter, the week 2,000 years ago when the Rabbi Jesus rode an ass, a donkey, into the city of Jerusalem. And the week ended with his execution by the Roman Empire. For the record, is specific practice of history. Historians would say we don't actually know much about Jesus. From the historical evidence, he was Jewish, he was a rabbi, he was killed by the Roman Empire. Some theologians might argue the Bible says the Jewish government executed Jesus, but from what I've read, crucifixion at that point was a distinctly Roman practice. Plus, I don't think the Romans would farm out their executions. They liked executing people, especially they liked making people afraid. That was the point of empire in many ways. Revising the story, some of that done in the Bible, was actually empire itself trying to erase the truth of its cruelty. Now, when I was first rereading the Bible, I tried to read the Bible as a teen, and I couldn't make sense of it. The long lists of who begat, just were like, what is that? I had no idea. There was no context for it. And I was really quite put off by that one thing where God says to Abraham, now go kill your kid on the altar. And I thought, mind you, I grew up Unitarian Universalist, so I thought, wait a minute, what are my neighbors doing in those churches? Then I went to theological school, feeling a call to ministry. And I started reading it, but this time understanding there was a context, how old it was, who were these people that wrote these books, these stories, and how had they been edited over the centuries. I didn't realize, for example, until I started the class, that Jesus was a Jew. Never mind, Jesus was a rabbi. The first thing I thought of when I realized, really that sunk in, I thought, wait a minute, then what are all those pogroms that the Christian church was fomenting, all that anti-Semitic violence? If Jesus was going to come back in their time, they were killing the people Jesus was going to come out of. That seemed bizarre. Jesus rides a donkey into Jerusalem at the beginning of his last week, his most famous week. Palm fronds were strewn at the gate of the city where he rode in. It was a sign of celebration, of respect. So at this point, it's I think important to mention the significance of palm branches in those times. In some generations prior to that, palm trees were such an important symbol of fertility and hospitality, such an important resource in a part of the world that could be very dry and where growing things could be very difficult, that palm trees, which flourished there, provided food, provided shelter, provided meaning. Palms in ancient times were a key source of nutrition. Dates were food for rich and for poor, food that traveled well in desert situations. The dates could be used to make wine. The seeds could be used to feed animals after the oil was pressed out of them. Palm trees provided oil from the seeds. Palm trees would become construction material from the trunks, and those palm fronds could be woven into ropes or to household goods. Palm trees were so central to the most ancient Middle East peoples. The ancient pagan peoples considered the palm tree to be the tree of life. The Canaanite ancestors of the Jews worshipped statues of a palm tree and called it Baal Tamar, the goddess of the palm. And the Phoenician goddess of love and fertility, Ashtoreth, was worshipped in the shape of a palm. Archaeologists even now continue to find images of palm trees in ancient ruins, palaces and temples, city gates, even crowns of kings and queens. Now, palm trees were not like not deities to the ancient Jews. Ancient Jews still considered palms very holy. They used the leaves in worship. And Muslims later viewed palm trees as central to life, an especially holy tree. When Jesus was born in the Quran, Mary is giving birth under a palm tree. In the various Christian sources about Palm Sunday, it's only in one of the stories, the one told by John, that palm branches were used. The other writers mention branches strewn at the city gate as Jesus rides in. So in medieval Europe, the Sunday before Easter, people who'd never heard or seen a palm tree would talk about it being a Sunday, sometimes based on the nearest usable tree branch that they could find. And so it might be known as Olive Sunday or Willow Sunday, Blossom Sunday, or sometimes they just call it Branch Sunday because spring had a while to yet before it appeared. Something important, though, is happening when Jesus is riding in over a carpet of branches, of palm fronds. He rides in on a donkey, an ass, and rides into Jerusalem, and his followers are proclaiming a king is arriving. That was an incredibly dangerous thing for them to do. The city was occupied by the Roman Empire, and the Roman Empire liked things its way. If it didn't matter to the Roman Empire, they're like, do what you got to do, just make sure you make enough to pay some taxes. But if they minded what you would say, trouble would surely follow. In the story, the Pharisees tell Jesus, they tell the followers of Jesus, you need to tell him to stop this. This is only going to lead to trouble. Jesus answers the Pharisees by saying, if these people who follow me were silent, even the stones would cry out from the earth. But I wondered as I was reading this story, rereading it and understanding it in theological school. Jesus was a rabbi. He was educated. He was listened to by a great many people. He had to have been known for what he was doing. And he had to have known that to ride into the capital of the region, the Roman capital of the region, and the capital of the kingdom he was in, he had to know, as he came to proclaim his empire of love and peace, he was setting this proclamation up against the proclamations of the violent Roman Empire. He had to know he was going to face the wrath of the empire. And indeed, the story ends, not too many days later, with his execution by Rome. Now, just as a side note, Rome did crucifying. They like to be in control of that stuff. So Jesus goes into Jerusalem nonetheless. And I wondered as I'm understanding this story in a contextual way, in a way where I understand the story and who told it, and who were the people listening, what language did they speak, what was the world like they lived in, and I wondered, why would he ride into what looked to me like certain death? And that they were laying these palm fronds on the ground before him in rituals that looked a lot like what people in our times do when they're throwing rice at newlyweds as they cross the threshold of a church, wishing them fertility, happiness, prosperity. Rachel Naomi Raymond had this dream, the one that caused her to sit up once in the middle of the night, being the daffodil and the rock lurking above her. The dream itself lurked in her mind for years. It grew for a long time. And she writes, it was only after she came to a crisis, a life crisis, that she understood finally what the dream was trying to say to her. It came to her in a flash. The rock was afraid to let the daffodil bloom because the daffodil could come to harm. if it were exposed, if it's blooming without and available to harm. But she realized at the same time, if the daffodil did not bloom, it would die. One of the things I got to do while I was in theological school, I also got to take a course on dream work. A Unitarian Universalist named Jeremy Taylor, who actually wrote some books on dream work. And he once told me and the other theological students in the class he was teaching, all dreams come in the service of health and wholeness. Those moments when I've had dreams that have caused me to sit up in bed with a gasp have revealed powerful understandings to me about my own life. It wasn't until years later that I understood from Jeremy Taylor that there are occasionally some rare dreams that come in the service of a larger health and wholeness. A wholeness beyond just one soul, one life, but the wellness and wholeness perhaps of a community or a world. Sometimes a call to a wholeness that might conflict with the individual dreamer's health and wholeness itself. I think a lot about fear as an interim minister. Fear can be corrosive. It can be like a rock on the life of congregations. Keep it from blossoming, from blooming. But I would never want to say that we shouldn't feel our fears or even be aware of them or understand them. I feel fear all the time. I remember the time I had my child, my oldest child was in a backpack, and I was the at-home parent, and I was preparing dinner for when his mom got home so we could eat. And I had a hot stove. I turned the burner on the stove, and I turned around, bent down to get a pipe, and here he was on a backpack, and he saw the red-hot burner and said, "Oh, what's that?" I don't know if he actually touched the burner, but he sure did burn his finger. He never made that mistake again. He had a healthy fear of red-hot stoves, red-hot heating coils. Fear has its uses. Fear is useful. We learn things about ourselves and about life from what makes us afraid. But what I fear most as an interim minister is that each of you or this fellowship might live by the fear and not discover or live by what gives you joy, what makes you blossom as individuals and as a community. Fear is useful for survival, but to live by it, it leaves a drab and impoverished life. No one joins a religious community to be more afraid. The point of religion, as I understand it anyway, is to find hope, even when the world seems hopeless. And this community especially, this religious community with its profound differences, each of us seeing and believing in such different and amazing ways. The world needs to see how we do not live by the fears we might feel because of all of our differences, but to see how you have now for generations enjoyed your differences, celebrated them, not avoided them. You're doing important work. You've cherished reason, diversity, the creation of community. You see it as a strength and a gift. Actually, in a spiritual tradition where we see everything is interconnected and yet diverse. The reasoning of this community seems to me the only logical path to survival on this earth. Let's not live by our fears and help our neighbors not live by theirs. It's important for me to understand this difference, this subtle difference, because there are times where I find myself becoming so fearful, overwhelmed by my fears, that I think about those assault rifles that are marketed to young men throughout this country as if an assault rifle is a way to solve your problems, solve any problems. Buy this assault rifle, you can defend your family, you can take care of yourself and your community. It's absolutely a lie, complete lie. The more of the damn things that are out there, whether they're all out there, I imagine impossible to take them back. The true evil of it are those who manufacture assault weapons as though they're useful tools. That's a lie. What are we going to end up walking around with nuclear weapons? Each of us, our personal nuclear weapon on our backpack on our back? How stupid is that? We live in a web of life, and what lets us blossom isn't the weight of an AK-47 on top of a daffodil bulb. It's the blossoming. What brings us to life are the people we've loved, the people who have cared for us, the people who have enabled us to see our fears and then live beyond them with courage. The children who were here yesterday with the talent show, they knew they would simply say, we want to do a talent show. We'd like to do it this day. Is the meeting room free? It was. We said, yes, of course. Empowered children who know that they can take risks, go out into the world, and especially meaningful yesterday, they were so excited about the talent show, and then you would see their faces as they got up to sing a song or play the piano, do a magic trick, and they would go, oh my God. The look of fear in their eyes, like, oh, is this going to go okay? You know what? They knew they were loved. They knew it was going to be fine. And that's what let each moment blossom for each of them. There are no walls thick and strong enough to stop death. There is no final solution to our fears. In doing that meditation with you today and imagining walls with barbed wire around this building, I almost had to sit down. I can't imagine that. There is no true safety outside the protection of love and kindness and interconnection. Yes, we find the best protection for anyone and everyone. Of course, we respond to our fears. But what we live by, that makes us vulnerable. You cannot move things forward, writes Rachel Naomi Raymond. You cannot change things without exposure and involvement, without risk and process and criticism. I know I will be afraid again and again, but I want the blossoming of my life and yours and this fellowship's and this world's to come out of love and friendship, the only way it really can truly happen. And be nourished as it blossoms by compassion and beauty and interconnection. And when I have to be fearful, when I have to know anger, I'll use it as fertilizer for the roots of these beautiful blossoming flowers. The reason that Rachel Naomi Raymond's rock gives the daffodil for not blooming is to prevent it from being hurt, to protect it. But for the very same reason, it must also bloom. It's a dangerous world. And if we're going to make any heaven here and now, it will be by the blossoming of love and mercy and kindness, the light of this chalice and the light we bring from ourselves to the world around us. If Jesus had meant to teach safety, he would never have gone to Jerusalem. And so in this week that follows through to Easter, I plan to walk in my mind on palm fronds as I go into whatever Jerusalems I may be going into. I will not choose to live under stones. I would rather risk everything here with you. And if it means I've had a shorter but more joyful life, I choose that. Because I will not live as if I were already dead. I invite you to sing with me as we close our worship. Blessed Spirit of my life, the words will be here on the screen and or on your screens if you're in the library or online. Please stand and bow to your spirit. Take what you love, take what makes you blossom, share it with one another, and share it in a world that needs to learn how important it is for them too to blossom and not to live by fear. And when the stone feels like it's too heavy to even move off, we'll be here. We can help each other pull the stones off so we may live. Go in peace, be in peace. See you again next week. Thank you.